just to make sure everyone's watches are synced, we'll wait like a minute or two at the most, and then we'll get started. I think there's still some people filing in. Plenty of seats in the front. We good to go anytime? Oh, the photographer's here, so now we can start. Morning, Jeff. I'm not sure if this is my good side. So good morning, everyone. That wasn't bad. That wasn't bad. So, you're always concerned. It's a Monday morning, what kind of response you're going to get. So let's try it again. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, that's great. See, my job is to get everybody sort of up and engaged so that we get lots of questions and good engagement as we get through the substantive part of the morning. So it's Monday. It's August, which is vacation month, and it's hot as hell outside, in case anyone's noticed. So we were a little concerned what the attendance would be like here in the room, and we're very pleased to see all of you brave the weather and set that alarm, get up early, get down here to DC to join us today. We're very excited about our industry day. We have some really good presentations, and we have a large portion of the day set aside for Q&A. So we're looking forward to a lot of discussion and back and forth, and make sure that we have answered all of your questions to the best that we can with the knowledge that we have, so that you could go back and do what you need to do, talking to the vendors in the room, to be able to provide the kinds of solutions that are critical for all of our agency staff and agencies as we transition together to digital government. So I am Lawrence Brewer. I am Chief Records Officer for the U.S. government, and I head up the office that is responsible for policy and outreach, scheduling and appraisal, records management training, and oversight and reporting. And I'm very happy to be sharing the stage, not only with my colleagues, but with our colleagues from GSA. So special thanks to Jeff and Ivana for joining us and presenting on the panel along with us. We really appreciate it. It was a much longer commute for them, as they had to come in from Philadelphia this morning and took the early train sometime around 6 a.m., correct? So if you think you had a bad commute this morning, at least you didn't have to take the train in from Philadelphia. So one of the things, our main focus today is really, as you know, is electronic messaging. So this is an area that we have been working on. We've issued some FAQs. We've issued a bulletin related to electronic messaging. But it's a very fluid environment as the technologies are developing to allow us in the agencies be able to identify, capture, and preserve electronic messages. So we're going to spend some time talking about a solid piece of work that we have been working on along with GSA and other agencies, which are our electronic messages use cases. So we have developed some definitions and some scenarios that identify sort of the records management lifecycle around electronic messages specifically. So we're gonna talk about that in quite some detail today. Let me put on my glasses. So I'm gonna move into our panel. I'm not gonna introduce each panelist. I'll let them do it themselves. And we're gonna start, if we can go to the next slide. Oh, I can do it, great. I guess I should have been here. So I'll give you a second to process that one. And then we'll go to the agenda. So first up, we'll have Lisa Haralampus give you an overview of our Federal Electronic Records Modernization Initiative and some of the work that we've been doing for the last several years. It's very closely tied to our NARA strategic plan for FY18 through 22 and really connects a lot of the various things that we are doing around modernization and moving the government towards a digital government or fully electronic government, whatever term you prefer. They're going to have a presentation from GSA, talk about some of the work that we have done together around Schedule 36 and what they are doing over in GSA related to Schedule 36. And then we'll do some detailed briefings about our use cases for electronic messages. And then GSA will then provide some instructions and advice on the recorded solutions for the demos related to managing electronic messages, which will be sort of the end point before we get into the Q&A. So I wanted to remind everyone, when we do get to the Q&A, we do have microphones on the aisles. I do at this point want to welcome all the people who are joining us online on YouTube for their benefit and everybody else's benefit in the room. If you would please identify who you are, what organization you are from, so that we can capture that not only for the minutes, but for those who are joining us right now. So with that, let's get to it. I'm going to bring up Lisa Haralampus to talk about the overview of the FERMi project.
Thank you, Lawrence. My name is Lisa Haralampus, and I work at the National Archives and Records Administration. I am the Director of Records Management Policy and Outreach, and I have the honor and privilege of leading the NARA half of the FERMi team. I am up here today to provide a little background and a little context for our Industry Day kickoff meeting. To start with, I said we are from the National Archives and Records Administration. Our name says it all. You are here at the National Archives. We are figuratively sitting under the Constitution and Declaration, and we're the agency responsible for archives management, for preserving our nation's history. But the other half of our name, the Records Administration, is the clue that why we're here today. We're also responsible for leading records management, for providing guidance, oversight, on scheduling, and working with the federal government to manage its records. From a people, process, and technology perspective, the federal government is not a monolith. It is full of many different organizations, many different agencies, many different approaches to trying to handle how do you help improve the people who create and receive the records, the people who create and receive records as they do their work. How do you identify the processes that the federal government uses that ends up creating records? How do you handle the wide variety of technology that you find in the federal government? It's starting in 2012 with the Managing Government Records Directive. Our focus has been on those three areas: improving things to help people do their job better, to look at the processes, and look at the technology. So within the Managing Government Directive, there was one particular item called A31, which talked about the need to look at automated processes and try to stimulate technology. NARA turned its viewpoint from just doing policy and guidance and being very good at managing paper records to say, what can we do to help make electronic records management better now so that the electronic archives management of the future will be in good shape? So we started in about 2015 with what we called our electronic records management line of business. We were trying to even then capitalize on the idea that there are 270 agencies facing the same problem. How do I do electronic records well? And could we start with a line of business to work on that? From 2015 to 2017, with contractor support, we learned, we explored, we developed partnerships. We reached out to GSA and to USSM. And we've been working on what you will now see has arrived to our FERMi initiative. In addition, this past year, in 2018, we issued our NARA strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, we still identified that we as an organization want to help agencies be fully electronic. So that was the goal in the directive. It was the goal of our records management line of business. It's the goal of the strategic plan, to help the federal government become a digital government, to help agencies continue to transition and move to electronic records management. And we have a goal that says we would hope to have several policies and processes in place to support this, and that is what is our FERMi initiative. Our name with FERMi got a little broader than a line of business. It's the Federal Electronic Records Modernization Initiative, but our goals got a little more specific. So we know we wanted to help agencies obtain electronic records management solutions and services by improving the procurement process. Because what we had learned through all of our oversight and through engagement with talking to our community was that you're very good at telling us what to do, you're not so good at telling us how to do it. We know that we need to get tools. We're struggling with figuring out what's the best tool. What are other people buying? How does this work? So we said, all right, well, let's look at procurement processes and see what we can do, as well as talk about the changing trends in ERM and are there any policy approaches we can take. So within FERMi, through our relationship with GSA and the Unified Shared Services Management Office, we have developed several products to help solve those two goals. And I'm going to talk about some of the background, and then hopefully this will give context for where these where the e-messages use cases come from today. So the first product I want to talk about is, well, actually, no, I take it back. I'm going to talk about the ones you're not going to have slides on. I'm going to talk about the Federal Integrated Business Framework and the Electronic Records Management Federal Integrated Business Framework. What the frameworks do is for every agency that is running a shared service, the USSM is trying to create a framework, a business integrated framework, so that will allow shared service providers to think about their business functions, their activities, and define them in such a way that there can be integration from service to service. So, for example, you have the travel system. How do they deliver their services? And how would an electronic records management framework fit in with that? So if we can identify that there is a function called create a record, capture a record, maintain a record, provide access for a record, then when that business is developing its framework, we can talk to each other. They say, well, I produced travel, I arranged for people to fly, and they have gone to their destination. And at some point, that process, the people have taken action, a process has been created, and it delivered a record. And we can start mapping our records requirements to their services, which is a very long-winded way of saying we're hoping to build electronic records management into future shared services through this framework, so that instead of 270 agencies having to maintain travel records, the shared service has that functionality built in, which is useful for shared services, but doesn't help you for the things that you do uniquely yourself. So when agencies have their own mission that's not a shared service, how do they start identifying what their requirements are? In 2017, we developed universal ERM requirements. We did this with a working group consisting of staff from GSA. We appreciated their assistance, as well as several other members of our federal records management community. We combed through our laws, our regulations, NARA guidance, international standards, as well as the working group's own expertise, and we created a high-level baseline that said these are the requirements that you have to manage records. So instead of looking at requirements for systems to manage records, the universal ERM requirements look at what needs to happen to the records themselves. The idea behind this approach was that there was far more flexibility in what agencies and vendors could produce to manage electronic records. So for example, the requirement is to capture electronic records. We don't say how to capture the records. We don't say that it has to be in a folder structure. There's a little more flexibility to look at what kind of tools and processes one would use for capturing electronic records. It was considered to be a starting point, so that when agencies were saying we're ready to go to the procurement process, we want to make sure we understand what requirements we need to have in our systems that'll be doing records management for our organizations, they could use these requirements as a starting point. They're very high level, so they described these are the 70 things that need to happen throughout the life cycle, and here are the media types that they need to work for, such as e-messages, or web records, or social media records, or desktop applications. We are in the process through FERMi of working on use cases for each one of those types of records. We started with electronic messages because in our directive, email management, which is a type of electronic records, was one of our first targets that we hit was managing email records by 2016. So we wanted to continue to have discussion on electronic message management. So we've come up with these e-message use cases, and you're going to hear a great deal about them in the future. So I'm going to skip over that and just talk a little bit more about how the use cases and the requirements and GSA fit together. So we created the universal records requirements. We were working with USM, but we also worked with the GSA Schedule 36 office management team. They helped create 2 special item numbers. One was already in existence. It was SIN 504 for physical records management. There was a long tradition of having a contract vehicle in place. And I'm probably not using these words correctly, which is why I'm glad GSA is here to help make sure that is said correctly at the end of this session. But the physical records management was already well understood. If you had to go buy shelving, if you needed to buy storage services, if you want to talk about digitization, things that managed paper records was in Schedule 36. But there was nothing very specific about electronic records management, which is where the government's been going and where our focus has been for the past 10 years. So GSA created Schedule Special Item Number 600. 600 is specifically for electronic records management. One of the bases for the SIN 600 is being able to say, I can meet the universal electronic records management requirements. So that's how these pieces work together. NARA is the leader in creating the requirements. GSA is the leader in creating the contract monitoring, again, not the right words, creating the contract vehicle that vendors can say, I can meet these requirements, here are my services, I am self-certified that I can get on this SIN, and then agencies can go look and say, I need someone to help me manage electronic messages, or I need someone to help me manage my social media messages. Are there vendors that would be able to meet the requirements, starting as a baseline? I wanted to give you one last resource with sort of that overview and that context, and I'm sure you'll have lots of questions for it. This is our NARA website that went live a few weeks ago for FERMi, and it describes some of those 4 things. You can find the requirements, you can find the GSA 600, the procurement, you can find the use cases, and you can find the ERM framework. So you can delve into that website and find a lot more information with the properly spoken, properly said information, and learn how those pieces fit together. And as we continue to work on use cases, they'll be added to this website. So with that, that is the context to help understand where 36 comes from. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Let's see if I can. Good morning. I'm going to try to figure out how all this works. Okay, got that. So my name's Jeff Calhoun. I'm the MAS branch chief for GSA, IWAC in Philadelphia. My team manages 6 multiple awards schedules to include Schedule 36. So we'll talk about that. First, I'd like to thank all of you for coming for sure. NARA certainly for helping us or really taking the lead in setting this up. It's been great for us. I know Ivana, we were talking on the way in how we appreciate going to an event where somebody had done so much work to set it up. So thank you for that. Okay, so multiple award schedules, and I won't read through these slides in detail, but for those of you that maybe aren't aware of some of the benefits of the program or kind of an overview of what the program is, also known as federal supply schedules, 20-year full period of performance, a base of 5 years with options. Currently, there's 39 standing solicitations. Each solicitation represents a category, so for us, it's office management. And within that category, the special item numbers, which Lisa touched on earlier. So some of the benefits to using the schedule. So if you're a contracting type, some of these might be familiar to you. So using FAR Part 8.4, you can cut out some of the, some of the steps, or some of the steps are streamlined, so to speak. To oversimplify it, sometimes we'll explain it. If there's 20 steps in the process, we try to take the first 10 at GSA. So, some of these, they're pre-negotiated terms and conditions. So we're going to negotiate with the contractors. We're going to set up established terms and conditions and pricing. We're going to vet the contractor for past performance. We're going to establish a subcontracting plan. So again, a lot of those initial steps that the federal government needs to take in order to purchase supplies and services, we take through the schedules program. And that last bullet, so schedule orders count towards small business goals. I think overall, something like 80% of multiple award schedule contractors are small businesses. I think in our schedules it's a little higher, so just to give you an idea. So some of the steps you can avoid, and as I said before, so if you think of it as a 20-step process and the first 10 are sort of taken for you, these are some of the steps that you don't have to take through the schedules program. So a formal source selection board, issuing the solicitation for a certain period of time, synopsizing, and in-depth past performance evaluations, as I said, are done by our team. So if you're familiar with the schedules environment, as Lisa touched on, the records management has essentially always lived under Schedule 36, but when you talk about electronic records management services, there's a lot of overlap. There historically has been. So Schedule 70, obviously, so IT services and software. Professional services, you have the professional IT services under that schedule. And then Schedule 36. So we talk about, the idea was to, in our partnership with NARA, to establish an effective total solution for electronic records management. So historically, those document services that are ancillary to electronic records management always lived under 36. So your digitization, your destruction services, your physical storage services, litigation support, that all already was established under Schedule 36. So to us, it was a natural fit. It was a great opportunity to get everything in terms of electronic records management solutions under a single schedule, and actually a single special item number. So previously, and Lisa touched on this as well, the previous structure, we had that SIN 51504, which was records management services, which essentially was, mostly geared towards storage services. So what we did, October of 2017, we kept that SIN 51504, but we converted it to a physical records management solutions SIN, and then we established the new SIN 51600 as an electronic records management solutions SIN. And as Lisa touched on, so this incorporates the universal electronic records management requirements that NARA created. So each vendor is going to fill out, in order to obtain that SIN, a self-certification that I am aware of and capable of meeting all of the standards associated with the 11 elements of ERM. And the last bullet is actually an important point as well. So if you're familiar with how the schedules program works, the solicitation, the terms and conditions are refreshed or updated by a mass modification. So if I'm a contractor and the ERM, the universal ERM requirements change, I'm going to get a mass modification, a modification of my contract, where I go in, modify my contract, and once again sort of certify, yes, my self-certification is still valid, and keeping in mind that the universal ERM requirements have changed in such and such a way. So I'm going to get that new universal ERM requirements document, and I'm going to sort of renew my certification to the new standards. And this is a snapshot of that capability certification. So you can see the 11 elements there, and they correspond to the NARA document. And again, the vendors are going to certify that they're capable and aware of those associated standards. And we've also, in an effort to, I guess, make market research easier for vendors to more effectively illustrate their capabilities, we've asked all of our SIN 51600 vendors to include this certification in their terms and conditions. So if you're familiar with GSE eLibrary, I would click on the vendor catalog for an ERM vendor, and their catalog would come up, which would include a snapshot of this capability certification statement. And this just sort of highlights what I talked about before, the mass modification process. So it's an effective way quickly for when NARA says, we've got a new version of this document, we want to get the message out, we want all of our vendors and all of our customers to quickly be aware of these changes. This is an effective way for us to accomplish that. So this is kind of a new, I guess, concept for the multiple award schedules program. We've consistently heard that as a customer, I'll publish my RFQ under a certain special item number, and I maybe wasn't aware that the vendor needed to publish that under another couple other SINs, because not everything that they need or that I need as a customer was included under that SIN. So you put it under 51600, but I need some document services and some other things from over here and there. So the idea here, we've included in a note to the solicitation that vendors are able to reach into any of their Schedule 36 SINs to provide a total solution under either 51504 or 51600. So as a customer, I have a physical records management RFQ or an ERM RFQ, and I just select one of those SINs, and the Schedule 36 contractor has access to all of their Schedule 36 SINs to produce that total solution under the single RFQ, single SIN. So we're hoping it simplifies that RFQ process for records management. So how to participate. If you're a current Schedule 36 vendor, this kind of goes through the documents you would need. It's as simple as a modification. So I'm in the records management arena already. I want the new SIN. What do I need to do? This gives you a snapshot of the documents you would need to submit with your modification request, but it's as easy as a modification request. And I want to say we're something like 10 days on average for a modification request to be processed. So, typically it's a very quick turnaround. You could be up and running quickly. For current contractors that are not under Schedule 36, you need to submit a new contract proposal, and you would be awarded a new contract under Schedule 36. Now, it's a whole new proposal process, but we expect that process will be streamlined significantly, because you're familiar with the process. You have a lot of the documents already put together because you're managing a scheduled contract elsewhere. So it's you're just kind of recreating that process under Schedule 36. So vendors with no MAS experience, we're kind of here to help. So this is email address. You can send your questions or send a request for us to kind of get in contact with you. But you would start under the Schedule 36 solicitation, and I think these slides, are we going to send these out? So they'll have this link to the solicitation and the Read Me First document. Excuse me. So this is a question we get, I think, pretty frequently, is the contract structure option. So I was actually having a conversation about this morning. So I think a lot of, particularly in this industry, I think service providers or solution providers utilize integrators in that, one contractor may hold the contract with multiple solutions. So the option as a vendor to participate, you could be that contract holder, responsible for the terms and conditions, the administration of the contract, all of that. So that's one option, you, the sole contract holder, solely responsible. The situation I think I was just describing is you could become a supplier to an existing contractor. So that's as simple as it's a letter of supply, all of the relevant documents, and again, a modification request to that contract holder's contract. So I think this is probably something If I had to guess, that we're going to see this more common in the ERM industry, and probably if you're familiar with Schedule 70, is probably more common under Schedule 70 as well. So the contract holder is responsible. So you as a supplier would be responsible providing them whatever they need, but they're actually administering the contract. And this is just, if you're familiar with contractor teaming arrangements, this is a function of the schedules program that allows multiple contract holders to team in order to provide a total solution. So this is just another benefit of the schedules program generally. So just another option for participating. So this is just kind of a summary slide of, the benefits. I mean, the first couple of benefits are just benefits of the MAS program generally. The third bullet, in terms of engagement with federal agencies and, our efforts through events like this, this is something we're really excited about, to be able to add value. This is something where we see a need. This is something where we see a lot of interest from customers and from vendors. So certainly this is something we're dedicating a lot of resources to, and I think that's certainly a benefit ultimately to utilizing this program. And I want to say we currently overall for the fiscal year, if we're talking about new contract awards, it takes us approximately 4 months total. But we have a team, some of the folks are here today, that are dedicated to this initiative. So this is something that's one of the highest priorities in our center. So in other words, an ERM contract comes in the door, we're looking for, our best and our brightest to get on it right away. And also our client advisor services, client advisor program. And maybe many of you in the room may have spoken to Bob Valenti, who wasn't able to be here today, but he's an example of our business development team that also has some client advisor experience. But we also have an independent branch which provides a full range of client advisor services. So from just, I have a couple of questions to, maybe can you help me build my RFQ, those sorts of things. So certainly there'll be ways to get in contact with us throughout this slide so we can have further conversations if that's applicable. But certainly another benefit, we think, to the program. And then the last slide is just a few more resources. So again, I think this is going to go out to everyone, so you'll have this to sort of access as you need to. And that's it for me. So Courtney Anderson from NAR, I think now is going to talk a little more detail on the use cases.
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We're really excited to see the level of interest in what we've been working on, so we're happy to have all of you here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the use cases for electronic messages in detail. That's why we're all here today. We're having this event because we want to give vendors the opportunity to create demos based on these use cases. We've chosen 3 scenarios that I'm going to go over that we would like vendors to create demos for. And we'll go through the process of how we're going to actually record those demos and then make them available to federal agencies so that they can watch the demos and use them as part of their market research to see what's available out there in the vendor space to manage electronic messages. So first, I want to talk a little bit about what the electronic messages use cases are based on. And Lisa talked about the ERM Federal Integrated Business Framework. And I'm just going to give you a little more information about them because when we started working on FERMi, we created the Electronic Records Management Universal Requirements. And that was the high-level framework. So then we have a number of other products that drill down and have more specific information, more detailed information. And the next thing we worked on is this ERM Federal Integrated Business Framework. And this is based on Unified Shared Services Management Office in GSA. It's based on their Federal Integrated Business Framework. So USSM is standardizing shared services across the federal government, and they have business standards leads for all the big service areas for shared services. So, for example, financial management, the business standards lead is Treasury. For travel, it's GSA. For HR, it's OPM. We are the standards lead for electronic records management. So, and one of the roles of the business standard lead is to create their own version of the Federal Integrated Business Framework. And the framework is basically, it's developed to serve as a model to help the federal government better coordinate and document common business needs throughout the federal government and improve processes and performance. So, specifically, the FIBF is a tool that identifies the key functions, activities, and capabilities necessary for agencies to manage their electronic records. So this is it's more detailed, but it applies to all records. It's not for a specific record type, but all types of records. And if you drill through this document, which is available on our website, you'll see it starts with high-level functions, which map to the life cycle of the record. So it's capture, maintenance and use, transfer, and disposal. And then it goes down into activities that need to be executed under that particular function. And then under the activities, we have the business capabilities that need to be executed to accomplish the activity. So you see it trills down further and further. Under the capabilities, they have inputs, outputs, and processes for each of those capabilities. And for each of the processes, we have created business scenarios that have events that show how that particular business scenario would be executed. And this will make a little more sense as I go through the use cases as well. You'll see how it all comes together. So the use cases, as I said, they are built on the FIBF, and they identify the roles and actions for and actors for each for managing the electronic messages. They are solution agnostic, and we've tried to purposely keep them broad enough that lots of different approaches can work for these use cases. The point of the use cases, too, is vendors can use them to evaluate, or agencies can use them to evaluate vendors' solutions and compare them against the use cases to see what will work best for them to manage their records. The use cases are an ideal workflow. So this may not be exactly how it works at your particular agency, but this is the ideal workflow that we've put together. And we are aware that there could be other ways of doing it. So this is and then this ties into what we've been doing with the Schedule 36 team, because it can be used, as I said, during the procurement process for agencies to help them identify what solution works best for them and to be able to evaluate and compare. So we created these use cases, and we used the same working group that we used for the universal requirements, and they reviewed the use cases. We posted them on our Records Express blog in January for public comment. We posted them in draft. We received over 200 comments, which was great, and they came from vendors, agencies, and NARA staff. We adjudicated all those comments, and they were very helpful, so thank you if you submitted comments. We really appreciate it. It was very helpful. And so now where we are is they are going to go through the Business Standards Council, which is USSM runs of all the standard leads. It will be the use cases as well as the FIBF will be reviewed by the Business Standards Council, and we're hoping to do that this fall. And the final say comes from OMB. They sign off on the use cases, and then they will be included in the Federal Integrated Business Framework, the government-wide Federal Integrated Business Framework. is an enabling function within the FIBF, and Lisa talked about this a little bit. is in all the different service areas. So, there's records in financial management systems, there's records in travel. So we're hoping, what we want to do is, the reason we use the model that USSM is using with the FIBF is we want to make sure that records are addressed throughout each of these service areas. So a little more detail about the use cases for electronic messages. There is a use case for each area of the life cycle. So we have one for electronic message capture, which talks about mainly about how to get that electronic message under records management control. There is one for maintenance and use, which talks a lot about providing access and the day-to-day functions of managing a record in this part of its life cycle. The access, managing the metadata, those sorts of functions. Also managing information requests such as litigation holds. All of that falls under maintenance and use. There is a use case for disposal, which is the process of getting approval to dispose of a record at the end of its life cycle, and then the actual destruction of the record. And then finally, transfer, and that is for permanent electronic messages. So this talks about the process of actually going through the approvals and transferring the electronic message to NARA at the end of its life cycle if it's a permanent record. So some other things that we talk about within the use cases. There are levels for each of the use case scenarios. You'll see level 1 scenarios are ones that affect most agencies. So these are the very common processes that every agency has to do, such as, capturing electronic message, making it available, managing the metadata. Those are all considered to be level 1 use cases, scenarios. Level 2 affects multiple agencies, but it may require some special processing. It's something that's specific to maybe just a few agencies. An example would be converting records into a new format to protect from technological obsolescence. So if you're migrating records to a new system, that would be a level 2 use case. It's not something that you would do every day, but it happens fairly often, but not quite as often as your day-to-day records management processes. And then a level 3 is rare, and it's only affects a few agencies, requires unique processing, and could be mandated by legislation. A good example of this would be the FRA amendment that said that electronic messages sent or received from personal accounts have to be captured within 20 days. Obviously, this isn't a process that would happen all the time, but would be a level 3 use case when you would have to forward an electronic message back to a official account. We also want to highlight some key terms that are in the use cases document. The full list is in the document, but there's a few that we wanted to highlight. The first is life cycle phase. Just as we said before, it includes capture, maintenance and use, disposal, and transfer. We also wanted to highlight the definition of electronic messages. So this is the definition in the Federal Records Act. It includes email, instant message, chat, text message, voice messages, and any other messages that meet the definition of a record. For our cases with the use cases and for the demos, we wanted to really concentrate on text, chat, and email. But we wanted to highlight that there's lots of different types of electronic messages. The business actors, these are the individuals involved in each of the business scenarios, whether it's the agency records management staff, the IT staff, the business unit. These are all in the business scenarios. And then finally, assumptions. So each of the use cases have a number of assumptions. So those are just the conditions that exist or a condition that has been executed prior to the start of the use case. Things that we aren't addressing specifically in the use case, but we want to highlight that this is an assumption. So these are the 3 scenarios that we have selected for the demos. And these are the ones that we would like to see vendors create demos for. The first is determine if an electronic message can be placed under records management control, and that comes from the capture use case. The second is manage the metadata of an electronic message record throughout the life cycle, and that's in the maintenance and use case. And then finally, disposing of approved electronic message records, and that's in the disposal use case. So these, I've put up here the workflows. You'll see in the use cases document there's a narrative for each of the business scenarios that walks through each event and then the input and output for each. So you have your event, and then you have the inputs needed to execute that event, and then the outputs as a result of that event being executed. But we also included these visual workflows to sort of show how this could happen in this visual chart. And I will say that this is just, like I said, an ideal workflow, and we recognize that there could be other ways that this could happen. So for putting an electronic message under records management control, first, of course, you would determine that the message is a record. And I also want to highlight, too, that all of this can be automated. It seems like it's very detailed, and obviously it's not something that you would want to do every one of these steps manually. We are really encouraging automation everywhere that's possible. And then you would check to see if the electronic message matched the approved format for that agency. If it does, then you would ensure that it contains the correct metadata to describe the content, context, and structure of the record. And if it does, then it can be brought under records management control. We also offered some other options here. If it's not in a format that can be captured in a particular system, it can be maintained in place as long as you can ensure it has the correct metadata, or it can be placed in a different repository. So we're just showing different options of how this could work. So the next scenario is managing the metadata of the electronic message throughout the life cycle. And this is in the maintenance and use case, as I said. And this is an example of, you're going through this electronic message is being used throughout in this part of the life cycle, and just having periodic checks to make sure that the metadata is complete. And checking to see if there's any additional metadata that's required. So for example, if you have a text message, you want to make sure that you have the phone number, the correct date and timestamp, and you want to make a periodic check that the metadata is being properly managed. You may want to also make sure that it's being updated if changes are needed. For example, if the records retention changes for this particular electronic message, you would want to make sure that that is updated in the metadata. Or if, for example, it's put on litigation hold, you want to make sure that metadata is updated. So this is just to show that you're constantly checking to make sure that the metadata is accurate and complete. So the final scenario we'd like to see demos for is the disposal of approved records from agency systems. So for this one, it's a little bit of a workflow, a business workflow process where the records management staff would receive approval to dispose of eligible records, either from the records officer or from the business unit, and that's actually in a previous business scenario. And then they would work with the information system owner to verify that and separate that the correct records that are eligible for destruction, notifying business owners that these records are going to be destroyed, and then actually executing the disposition, creating the audit log, and then making sure that the audit log is properly captured and saved. So, and we know that the business actors might be different for each of these. Like, for example, it may not be the system owner executing the disposition. It may be records management staff. It could be business owners. So we're flexible on that, but this is the ideal workflow that we're showing in this particular workflow. So here are some guidelines for the demos. As we said before, that vendors should consider addressing each type of electronic message, specifically text, email, and chat. We're really interested to see what type of solutions are out there, especially for chat and text. You have, for each demo, for each scenario, you have no more than 5 minutes with a 5-minute introduction, so the maximum time for each total demo is 20 minutes. And they will be, and Ivana will talk about this a little later, they will be recorded with GSA and then made available on the acquisition gateway to federal agencies. So they won't be made available out to the public. The agency will the agency personnel will actually have to sign into acquisition gateway to view the demos. Here are some considerations when thinking about creating your demos. As I said before, we want automation to be considered wherever possible. And in the use cases document, we describe 4 different general approaches to managing records. So we'd like you to describe which approach that you're taking with your solution. And the first, just to give you a little more background, this is all in the document, but to give you some more background, is traditional electronic records management system. And this is your very traditional electronic records management system where a user would actually save the record into the system. It would capture all the metadata and assign a retention period. And that system is dedicated to electronic records management. And that's an approach that could be ideal for, like case management and agencies with like a very clear mission. one mission. Another would be hosted. So this would be like electronic records management as a shared service. So this would be a system dedicated to electronic records management that could be used by many different agencies, either run by a vendor or hosted by an agency. So this would be like your typical shared service model. Another would be embedded ERM. And in this model, the ERM is embedded into another business system. So they're leveraging the business system and adding on some electronic records management functionality within that system. And then finally, the ERM as a service as a microservice. So this would be microservices available attached to business systems used to manage electronic messages. And that sort of is the most modern approach, the one we haven't seen quite as much, but we'd like to see more of it. So the workflows will change based on which approach that you're using, so we would like you to describe that a little bit in your demos. So next I'm going to invite Ivana Henry up to talk a little bit more about how to schedule and actually do the demos.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ivana Henry, and I'm the Business Development Director for GSA's Integrated Workplace Acquisition Center. And basically, my role in this GSA NARA partnership is to manage our communications with industry partners and also to assist federal agencies in using Schedule 36 and making it easier to use. So today, I'm going to spend a few minutes walking you through the process for how we intend to record and share these vendor solution demonstrations with federal agencies. I want to emphasize that the process I'm going to share with you is a draft process. We put it together as a starting point to gather your feedback today. So based on the feedback that we get during the open discussion or even afterwards, we will either finalize the process and kick it off, or we will make some changes as needed. Okay, so the intent of doing the vendor demos is to assist the federal government in conducting market research on the available electronic records management solutions. So as it stands currently, our GSA schedule contract holders post catalogs on GSA's Schedule e-library system. And these catalogs include their pricing information, terms and conditions, and they can include other marketing information such as links to their websites. We always encourage the vendors to make sure that these catalogs are comprehensive and professional looking, because e-library is where we tell our federal agencies to go to do their market research. So with SIN 51600, our contractors will also have in their catalogs a copy of that vendor certification that both Lisa and Jeff talked about. So as a contracting officer, I can go to Schedules e-library, look under SIN 51600, be able to pull up those catalogs, review the information there, and that'll give me a good sense of the competitive pool that's available under the new SIN for their requirement. Now, these demos are intended to be an additional resource in addition to e-library. So these demos would give them a visual of the solutions that are available under the SIN, and they could use these solution demos in their market research phase and requirements development phase, just like they would the catalogs and other information that's available to them. And the idea is that by having the vendors available to them under the schedule, as well as the use cases that Courtney talked about, and then this visual of the solutions available, that it would make it easier for the CO or the IT person or anyone else that's been designated to develop requirements, to develop competitive requirements under the SIN. The opportunity to record the demos would only be open to the SIN 51600 vendors, and that's obviously because those are the vendors that are certifying that they're able to offer solutions that apply to the universal ERM standards. They would complement the existing contractors' catalogs. The initial recording would be based on the use cases for electronic messaging that Courtney shared, but as you heard, NARA is intending to develop other use cases for the other elements in the universal ERM requirements. So as those other use cases are developed, we want vendors to have opportunities to demo those solutions as well. They will be open to the current contractors, but if you're in the process of getting on board or you come on board a little bit later, you will still have the same opportunity to record your demo. Of course, there will have to be some general guidelines for the recordings that we'll share with you ahead of time. Courtney already talked about the length of the video and some of the content guideline and considerations listed here. We really want the recordings to be as short as possible, so they don't have to be 20 minutes. And the concern there is that if they're too long, that people might not watch them. But at the same time, we want to allow enough time for you to do a good job of demonstrating and explaining how your individual solutions meet the use cases and can help agencies with each of the three scenarios described in the use cases. So we're looking for your feedback on, is that long enough or what's the right time limit there? And then we know that a lot of vendors may already have videos that promote your company or promote your solutions overall. These videos would have to be a little bit different in that we'd want them to be specific, the content, to the use cases and not overly marketing of other solutions. As part of that, we will also be looking at the content and the language to ensure that the videos that are shared with agencies don't in any way imply that GSA or any other federal agency customer is endorsing or preferring one solution over another. Okay, so getting into the proposed process, as I said, we haven't finalized it yet because we want to get your feedback, but the idea is that once we finalize the process, you would be notified, and we'd want to make the scheduling of the demos as easy as possible. So it would probably be as simple as just sending us an email requesting to do the demo. Now, at the same time, we realize that this could be a lot of work for both the vendors and us, and we want to minimize the amount of time we have to spend doing videos. And in order to not get into cases where we're re-recording multiple times before we can have a final product to share, there will be some pre-work required. So there's 3 things I've listed here. One of them is a demo script form that we would give you, and it would be pretty simple, 3 columns where you would list each slide or scene, what the viewer should expect to see on that slide or scene, and what they should expect to hear. We would look that over just to make sure that there's nothing questionable or that we have concerns about in the content. And then from that point, you would use that script to create your final slide deck. We would also ask for a copy of the final slide deck prior to the recording. Just again, as you start to build your demonstration, you may end up deviating from the script, and that won't be a problem necessarily, but we just want to make sure there's no surprises and there's not something added in that then causes a problem where we can't release the video. And the last thing we would need is some sort of release form that will have our legal draft up, basically just to make sure that we're able to use and share the video recording with other agencies. So that would be the scheduling and pre-work, and then the process itself. In thinking about the process, we realized that not all vendors may have the same video recording capabilities as others, and at the same time, we, in our acquisition center, don't have video recording expertise necessarily either. We're acquisition experts. We're not video recording experts. So what we thought we would do to level the playing field is use our virtual meeting space platform. We're currently using Adobe Connect, but it would work with whatever platform we end up using. And that platform has a built-in recording option. So I know some of you that registered may have attended the GSA webinar on ERM a few weeks ago, but if you've attended any webinar, it would be similar to that process in that we would send you a link to connect into the meeting space room, and the key difference would be that we would make you a presenter so that you have control over the slides and can present your demonstration. On our end, we would hit the record button before you began, and that way would capture your presentation as you gave it. The other difference would be we wouldn't have 100 attendees in there. It would pretty much just be whoever's presenting your solution demonstration on your end, and then the government staff that's recording the demo. Once the recording was complete, you would be able to review the final recording. We would download it to a movie file. We would review the content with our communications branch. As long as we stuck to script in the slide deck, I don't anticipate any problems or re-recording needed. And they would also check for technical aspects such as audio video quality. But again, from past experience of recording these things, there usually isn't an issue with the recording unless there was an unexpected internet connectivity issue on our end or your end. The last thing we would have to do with the video file is have it closed captioned so that it would be 508 compliant, and we would do that on the GSA side. Okay, so once we have the final recording, we'll be able to release the video. So we're looking to do this as video on demand, meaning that agencies could go in and access and view these videos whenever they like versus having to do it live or on a predetermined schedule. The release type would be internal versus external, meaning that the videos would only be available to federal government users only. In order to have that secure access, we'll probably put the videos as a resource on the acquisition gateway. So if you're not familiar with the acquisition gateway, that's an online portal that GSA built as part of the government-wide category management initiative. Most of the content in that gateway is secure for authorized federal government users only. There's a small portion that's set aside for public to get access to, but these videos would be on the secure part. And basically that was based on our assumption that vendors would be more comfortable with sharing video demonstrations that other vendors wouldn't also be able to see. You could let us know if that's the case or not during the discussion period. And lastly, we would also have hyperlinks to the use cases along with where to find the video recorded demos on our GSA.gov Records Management Solutions webpage that we're working on right now, enhancing the available information on. So that's all I have as far as the proposed process. I think next Lawrence is going to come up and get us started on an question and answer and discussion period, but I leave you with a few questions. We're hoping that agencies will help us answer whether or not they would watch these videos as they were described, and if so, if you'd share some of the benefits or how you think you would use them. And most importantly, we want to hear from industry if you would take advantage of this opportunity, and also about the process, what you think of it so far. We're willing to change it if you have ideas for how we can make it even easier. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ivana. So at this time, I'm going to invite the rest of our excellent speakers from this morning up to the stage for Q&A. I'd also like to let everyone know that this morning's presentations have been recorded. They'll be available on NAR's YouTube channel, up on our website. In addition, we'll make sure that the slides get out to everybody, probably through Records Express and our blog. As you probably noted on the slides, there were a lot of screenshots of Records Express. So I encourage you to check in on our blog, and we'll be posting content there for you all to review later. So I did also want to note, in case anyone was wondering why this is such a critically important initiative for us, and of course I mentioned the connection to NAR's strategic plan, but we have some very distinguished guests who have joined us. Not only do we have the Deputy Archivist of the United States, Deb Wall, in the room listening in, and I see taking notes, but we also have the Archivist of the United States, David Ferriero, has joined us, and thank you for joining us, sir. I'm sure it was probably difficult to find some time with all of the events that have been in the news for the past week that I'm sure have been keeping you busy. I won't mention what those are, but it's really encouraging to see not only attendance in here from the agencies and the vendors, but from the highest levels of the National Archives itself. I mean, we all feel this is a critically important initiative, and we are really looking forward to working with you all so that we can all be successful moving forward in that transition to fully electronic government. So as I noted before, we have quite a bit of time set aside today for Q&A. We have our panelists with their microphones hot and ready. And one last time, I wanted to remind everyone that we have microphones on the aisle in the room. Please raise your hand. Be sure to identify your organization, your name, and same for those who are online. We have Jim up front monitoring the chat. If you have a message, please do the same. So let's see what we have queued up. Let's start with Jim, see if there are any questions online for the panelists.
Yes, we have plenty, Lawrence. Thanks. The first question is from Quintel Freeman Allen on the Joint Staff. She's a record management specialist there. And she asked, this is a little bit amorphous, so I'm not sure how you're going to answer it, but how do you plan on handling specific system requirements like high-level security systems? What considerations were made for that? And what about special handling like PII?
I'll start from the policy and guidance perspective. The use requirements do not contain the specific requirements for classified and PII. That's a different set of policy instructions. But if during a demo, a vendor wanted to say, here's how I would follow capture, maintenance, use, and here's how I would handle that, they're more than welcome to include that in their demos. But the demo is specific to the business function, activity, and use scenario for just that specific scenario. Any add-ons to that? I'm looking to the panel to make sure they agreed with me on that.
It might also be helpful, since we have 4 panelists, if you could direct your question to a specific person if it is a very targeted question that you have. So why don't we go back and forth? Any questions in the room? Do we have any queued up? Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name is Joel Limerick. I'm with Document Systems Incorporated. I've been in this industry, I guess, second generation. My parents started a microfilming company doing records management, and I started in '95 thinking that I could change the world with digital imaging. So I've been summarily humbled many times over the years. But it is exciting to see this collaboration with NARA and GSA, and dare I say that it's even visionary. So that's tremendous. On the way down here, I have a bunch of in-laws in town from all over the country, and they kept talking about the National Treasure movie franchise. And then I thought this was at a different office building, so I sent them a text on the way in saying that I was going on to the set of a National Treasure movie with the National Archives in the background. But so it's exciting that DC is doing this and that the government is doing it. This is for Mr. Calhoun from GSA. We have all of the IBM content management products on our vendor schedule. But I noticed that some of our colleagues don't have any products listed. Is that a requirement to have products listed on your GSA schedule?
No, it's certainly not a requirement to have products. You meaning, I guess specifically, what do you mean by products? Can you clarify?
Product part numbers as opposed to services only.
Okay, right. Certainly not a requirement. We have a number of multiple award schedule contractors that operate in a deliverable, a service priced per deliverable or service priced simply per labor hour. Certainly we would encourage a broad range of products and services in order to get to that total solution, but I think we talked about before that there are a number of options you can, for you to get there in terms of if you were to, even team with other awarded contractors. So it's not a requirement, no. But again, we would encourage them to essentially whatever they do commercially that's relative to records management, we would encourage them to propose under their contract.
Hi, testing.
You got it.
There we go. Tim Schinkel, Milliken and Associates. Just a question for, I guess, Ivana, Henry. Is there an email or somebody we contact to get the demo started, and then what is the timing? When will this all happen?
Yeah, so absolutely there's an email you can contact us, but as far as the process and getting started, it's still in draft, so as soon as we gather all the feedback and finalize it, we would send out a notification to all the SIN 51600 contract holders. But the email, if you want to provide feedback, is recordsmanagement@gsa.gov, and it's the same email address that you would have received reminders about today's event from.
And we have a good partnership. So if you accidentally email recordsmanagement@nara.gov, we will send it their way.
Yeah. The email is actually in the slide deck, so when we send those out, you'll have it. Do you want to go back to a question online, Jim?
Yes, I have one. Not sure of this person's name because they didn't give me their full name, but it looks like Mr. Yoakley. He's asking, will the universal ERM standards take the place of NARA's use of DoD 5015.2, and will there be a certification program?
We see DoD 5015.2 as a complementary standard. The universal ERM requirements are not replacing it. They do different functions. So DoD 5015.2 is being revised. DoD staff are looking at reissuing it. That is their procurement and technology standard that's needed for DoD. They are looking at the universal ERM requirements to influence and be part of their revised standard when that comes out in FY19. So we expect that they will be complementary, but they each have slightly different purposes. One of the main differences is that the universal requirements talk about the actions that happen to electronic records, where DoD 15.2 talks about the system requirements. So it's a slightly different way of looking at the world, and we're hoping we're moving towards more flexibility in what we're asking agencies to do. Was there a second part to that? Okay, I'm sorry.
It's certification.
Oh, certification. Well, actually, GSA, it's a self-certification process for vendors to be on 600. And I'm looking at my colleagues, if you want to provide any additional.
We have been working with DoD, and we've had some conversations. As Lisa noted, it is a design specification for DoD agencies. But they're certainly, we get that question a lot because they are perceived as requirements, and there is an overlap there. But we have identified our universal ERM requirements as a core set, as Courtney noted before, as a starting point for all agencies. We have a question in the room over here.
Good morning. My name is Dave Simmons, and I'm GSA in records management, and part of that partnership is we're records at gsa.gov. So we'll forward to any emails as well. My question is about probably to Courtney, but also to you, in the sense that contextualization of records is a really important part of identifying records and where they're supposed to be placed, both electronically and physically. And in that description of services, one of the things that's really important is for an agency to lay out a taxonomy or subject structure to map the types of records or the content of the records to a specific schedule. Is taxonomy services considered part of those record solutions, or have you had any discussion about that?
We talked a little bit about it, and in some of the scenarios, there are scenarios, they don't talk specifically about taxonomy, but they talk about groups of records that would go together, and then, assigning the retention schedule to that group of records. So we don't go into specific taxonomies, but at a high level, we talk about grouping records as a group of records together and managing them within that.
Well, as a follow-up, I would consider looking at that specifically because that's a technology that many IT offices are entertaining, and the pricing on that is all over the board, and the ability for companies to do that service. So we could talk about general groupings, but I think more specifically for mapping electronic content in an automated way, you're going to need that structure.
Thank you.
And certainly from a GSA standpoint, we would welcome, vendors that have that expertise to start having the conversation of, how can we effectively set up a pricing structure that would make sense under the schedule and would hopefully complement some of the other solutions to, again, provide that total solution. So if anyone has that expertise, we certainly would welcome input.
Question on the other side of the room? Yes,
Hello.
Please go ahead.
Hello, Ingrid Petersons from Unisys. I'm going to assume the answer is no to this, but did you consider providing the vendors a notification if their video is viewed through the acquisition gateway?
We haven't considered that, and I'm not actually sure of what we can track in the gateway. I'm assuming that we'll be able to have click-through rates, things like that, but that's definitely something we'll look into.
Next question. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. This side of the room.
Hi, Amy Simon, Savant Group. This question is a little bit of a follow-up to the previous gentleman's question from GSA, Courtney or Lisa. So often when tackling electronic records issues at a new agency, even if you go in with the intention of a particular product or a solution, you find out that there's a lot of upstream work that needs to be done in order to have the groundwork prepared. And so a lot of that is covered in the assumptions in the electronic use cases, that these use cases make sense if all of these other things are already met, and often those other things are not close to being met. And so I guess my question is, as someone on Schedule 36, kind of where are those guidelines about what can be included? So I noticed that a needs assessment was, an acceptable thing, but I think there's often much further work upstream that is required to even get to the place where evaluating tools or doing implementations or any of that is even possible. So that's media neutral schedules, that's revamping a records control schedule, that's even mapping data architecture. Sometimes there's so many other pieces for an implementation of any particular tool to be successful. So I just wanted to hear some, I don't know, who wants to speak to that, some context on that piece.
So I believe one of the reasons we structured the demos, the theoretic we wanted, was sort of, we said 20 minutes, but 3 scenarios. The idea that there'd be 5 minutes ahead of time to do any explanation that you wanted to provide to explain what your tool does, what your service does. So within that part, there could be, we understand you may need to do X, Y, Z, before you're able to then say this is how our capture process or our disposal process would work. So we've given a lot of flexibility. I would, from our perspective, what we're hoping to find is that there's a wide variety of approaches. So people could explain, I do this. Once you've done this, which is not part of this demo, this is how we conduct it. And then there'd be a different opportunity for agencies to evaluate and say, yes, that's a sort of, that would fit my business process, my model. I'm a small organization, I need something very specialized, or I'm looking to buy a wholesale enterprise-wide solution. So there's a lot of variety for how to approach it. And I believe it was the intro first and then the 3 demos, but I don't know how much flexibility there might be to conclude and explain as well.
I think, it's a maximum of 20 minutes, so you can use that however you want, If you want to, talk about the other services that you offer to help agencies get to that point, I think you're welcome to do that.
And I think, I'll say from, I think we're beginning to hear more and more from agencies that are maybe in the very initial stages of thinking about how to do this. And I think from a client advisor, from a business development standpoint, you mentioned the needs assessment and analysis, special item number, but those services certainly are within scope of Schedule 36. And I think our intent is if we come in contact with an agency where we say, perhaps you need to send an RFQ out for services just to get you to a point at which you can start to evaluate solutions, we would try to communicate that. So I think maybe a benefit to us sort of having more and more interaction with the customers at an early stage, we could encourage that sort of behavior when it was appropriate.
Thank you, Amy. Why don't we go back to Jim, do an online question.
Yes, okay. Rob Hankey asked, can you post a list of vendors who may be interested in partnering somewhere?
I guess I'd be looking for, so interested in partnering, meaning, I guess maybe we can follow up, because vendors that we're interested in partnering, I think we'd like to speak to them and talk to them about their options for participating. So if it's a vendor that's interested in participating, then we can certainly talk through specific options that kind of we went through in some of those slides.
I think he was, first of all, thinking in context of this meeting, whether there's going to be a list posted, but then on a broader sense, I thought sometimes you guys have with certain sins in that lists of people who are interested in partnering so that people can contact them.
So GSE library is going to list both, if you can go into the physical records management or any of the Schedule 36 sins, but certainly the records management sins, and list all of the contractors that are awarded. So if I'm a vendor looking to perhaps partner with an existing contractor, that's where I would start, and probably look for somebody that it made sense for me to partner with. But again, if it's a vendor that's interested in participating, we'd certainly like to talk to them.
We'll do one more from the
Sure.
online.
This is a pretty technical one. So Mr. Yoakley or Oakley again asks, can we use Camtasia and just upload a video in whatever format like MP4 or .mov that you desire? We can include anything like closed captions, and it would be way easier for us to use what we're used to and the equipment that we're familiar with, and then GSA can tell us what standards they want us to upload it in.
I'm not seeing any reason why, if you already set up to do that, and as long as you stayed within our guidelines, we could probably accommodate that, yes.
Okay, great. Don, question? Yes, please.
Hi, Susan O'Brien from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. So I had a comment first and then a follow-up question on that. So first, a comment from a federal agency perspective. is that when I was excited to see demos for use cases, however, I was thinking more in terms of a tool I would have a temporary trial use for. I think that would be much more useful than watching a video. So I wanted to pass that comment on, if that's something that you can look into in the future of setting up common use cases where there's tools we can go and use for a limited time period. And then the other comment was that, and leads to my question of that you chose messaging, electronic messaging as the use case. And from a federal agency perspective, you know, a lot of us at least handled the emails and of course have workarounds for the other messages to meet the amendment to the Federal Records Act with meeting the 2016 goal for managing emails. And we're all looking at how we meet the 2019 goal and beyond for permanent and for temporary messages, especially with unstructured content records that are, you know, all over the place in an electronic format and not saved in a record-keeping system. So do you have any clue of what other scenarios and use cases you're looking to next, such as handling unstructured content that are records and how you can help agencies manage that better?
Yes, so right now we have a draft for social media records that's being reviewed by the working group, by our requirements working group, and we'll put those out for comment probably next, you know, in the fall. And then we are looking at web records. We also have, like I said, like desktop applications, but also shared drives. So I think that could address some of the unstructured data with those use cases. So we will be working on those, and we can, you know, make sure we contact you for input if you're interested in that.
And we, the total amount of use cases will be on the slide that Jeff had, where he described the 1 through 11. Had the list. Those are our intention is to have a use case for each one of those types. What we're learning as we go along, that because we made some decisions to sort of describe an ideal workflow, that they're starting to look very similar. So we're really interested to see if the social media and web cases, are we able to tease out the differences for those specific types versus electronic messages. But as we're getting more experienced at working this way, we're hoping to be able to get to many more of those. To answer to your question, get there as quickly as possible. We planned to do the more technical, the engineering and the formats sort of last. So we're kind of working through the related ones of e-messaging, web, social media. Then we're going to tackle the hard ones in the middle of unstructured, or desktop applications, cloud services, and then we're going to move our way through.
Right. So Susan, I'm sure your next question is, you know, the timeline, which Lisa just mentioned, as quickly as possible, is basically the timeline that we're on right now. And you know, the good thing for us, and I think for everybody here, is there's no shortage of needs, regardless of the formats that we're talking about. So we want to get you out of the business of creating workarounds and start to address some of the more complicated ones that are looming on the horizon. So.
And I also encourage you to look at the ERM Federal Integrated Business Framework, because that applies to all record types and is in a lot of detail, you know, that applies to all records, so that may help too.
Okay, back to Arian over here on this side of the room.
Deepan Chadwa, project manager at BCPI, Document and Records Technology Company. I have a comment and a question. You asked about the initial thoughts on the proposed process. This is for GSA. You mentioned that the recording is only available to the vendors under 51600. So you're limiting yourself to 36 vendors, if I'm not wrong. Are you open to making it available to GSA 36 scheduled vendors or 70 who haven't applied for 51600? And my second question is, for someone who is on 36 schedule or 70 schedule, how long does it take to have SIN 51600 timeline?
Okay. So the answer to the first question, I think, is right now is no. I think the idea is that the demos correspond with those vendors that have certified that they're capable and aware of the universal ERM requirements as they correspond to each of the 11 capabilities that they provide. So we want those to work hand in hand. We want the demos to be of vendors that have certified that capability. So at this time, we're just limiting it to the SIN 51600. which has that requirements attachment to it. And in terms of the timeline, I mean, I guess I didn't really go into detail, but it's going to vary depending on if you're an existing Schedule 36 holder. As I said, it's a contract modification, and it's a matter of weeks, honestly. If you're a contract holder under another schedule, it's a little bit longer because you have to go through the contract proposal process. But again, if you're familiar with the MAS process, it's going to be streamlined. And no matter what your option or what your process, we have, like I said, a dedicated team, and this is a very high priority for our center. So we're going to work to do our best to sort of streamline the process, no matter what it is. So.
And I would just add that from our perspective, this SIN went live last October, and 36 vendors have managed to get through the process already. So that was pretty good. And more coming.
Yes.
And I just want to clarify that this is going to be an ongoing process. So even if you aren't on now and you're on 4 to 6 months from now, if you're offering electronic messaging, you will be able to have the opportunity to create the demo then.
Let's go back to this side of the room.
Good morning again. It's Dave Simmons at GSA. I've heard this morning you describing electronic messaging, and I was given to believe the email under the capstone approach had a very tight definition, but this was a much broader definition. How do you differentiate between electronic messaging and social media?
Social media, well, that's a very good question. From social media records, we're discussing the records that are generated, the posts, the blogs, the elements that go with being on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter. With the communication piece within a social media tool that we were considering to be electronic message would be the direct messaging feature. So we're basing it based on the 2014 amendments. It said it's communications between individuals, electronic communications in between individuals. So if you're talking about Facebook's direct messaging feature or Twitter's direct messaging feature, that would be covered under the e-message use cases. If you're just talking about posts or blogs, one-to-many communication that happens in social media, that would be covered under a different use case. That answer your question?
Sort of,
okay.
Yes, thank you.
And there is more information. If you go to our website, we have an FAQ on social media records and the records management implications around social media records. It gives a much more expansive definition and description of what those are that further distinguishes it from what we're focusing on right now. We'll go back to an online question.
Yes, a few different people have asked this kind of a question. Aside from what's on the slides today, do you have some place where you're posting the detailed instructions for the demo videos and for the self-certification process?
We will be sharing the slide deck with everyone after the meeting. We can actually post it on our gsa.gov website as well. And then you'll be able to provide comments on it to that records management at gsa.gov email address. So that's a good point.
And the certification process, there are instructions contained in that vendor certification document itself, and it's attached directly to the Schedule 36 solicitation. So that's posted online as well. And as always, we have that records management at gsa.gov and a team that's kind of ready to work through whatever questions vendors may have as they're looking to participate.
Question over on Simon.
Hello, my name's Mary Ann Burnett. I'm from Deloitte Discovery. I want to thank you so much for presenting this today. It's very, very helpful. Our company is in the process of doing the certification for 51600, and I was wondering if there is access to the other applications that have been done, the other 36 that have been certified. Is that publicly available to view what their applications were, or is that somehow not available?
Once again, if you go to the GSAE library, the SIN 51600, you'll have access. It'll show you all the awarded vendors, and there'll be a GSA catalog link there, which will include their terms and conditions, which should include, and we're trying to work through, I'm not sure if we maybe have a couple that we're still working with, but they all should include a copy of that vendor certification statement within those terms and conditions.
Okay, Jim, we have any questions online?
Yes. So Jammu Sundararajan and Nichelle Early have the same question. Is there a fast lane process for Schedule 36 the way there is fast lane process for Schedule 36 for those who have Schedule 70, because there already is one on Schedule 70, for instance, for emerging technologies.
Right, and we're familiar with that, and we're always, I think, looking to adopt some of the other schedules processes and where it makes sense to improve our process. But like I said, in terms of it's not a formal fast lane process, so to speak. But as I said, this is a priority in our center, and we have a dedicated team. So it's certainly going to be a streamlined process, even if it's not the official designated fast lane process that I know IT70 has used.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Good afternoon. My name is John Francesco. I'm the Vice President of Active Navigation. So to GSA's credit, for those of you who aren't on the 36, they moved quicker than any other schedule we've ever worked with, and we knocked it out in about a quarter. And it was a completely new schedule. The question really is to you, Ivana. In terms of the videos and the demos, it would be far better for the industry if we could just deliver you demos that met some qualifications. They're going to be far more professional. We'll make sure the audio is up to snuff and the video is qualified. If we do it over Adobe Connect, again, we'll participate. I've already sent you an email to participate, but you're going to get lower quality material if you guys choose to go that direction.
Okay, that's good feedback. As long as the guidelines are followed, it doesn't matter to us. It actually, if vendors are able to create their own videos, it'd probably be easier on us, less work for us. But at the same time, I guess we'll pose that question out there, see if all vendors have that capability, and if not, we'll offer both options probably. Thanks.
Okay, Jim, back to you. Any questions online?
Yes, Carol Koich asks, she's with MFR Consultants. She's asking, where will the professional services for these universal ERM products be located? GSA Schedule 36 or 00 Core?
So, as I said, the Schedule 36, both of these SINs are intended to be a total solution. So certainly any professional services related to records management are included directly within either the physical records management SIN or the electronic ERM SIN 51600. So certainly included under Schedule 36.
Back to you, Jim.
How does the acquisition gateway authenticate such that only authorized government reps or government personnel can view?
That's a technical question there.
Yeah, I think it's too, I started in IT, but it's been a long time, so I'm not, I don't know the technical answer on how they do it. I just know that agencies have to use their PIV or CAT card to actually access it. So it's intended to be extremely secure. We could probably get some information on that and follow up with you, or if you email me at recordsmanagement@gsa.gov, I'll make sure I get you that answer.
Looks like everyone in the room is still pondering, so Jim.
Okay, I have one more. So Latricia from Source America asks, are there any special parameters to follow in order to use a subcontractor who has elements of 51-600 not held by the prime?
So I'm going to assume we're talking about a scenario where a vendor does not provide all of the services themselves and they're looking to leverage the capabilities of a subcontractor. For the schedules program overall is meant to leverage your commercial experience, your commercial approach to how you provide services. So if your commercial approach is that you provide a certain segment of the services or products and you typically subcontract out, then you're certainly permitted to present your proposal under the schedules program in that way.
Yes, right here.
Samuel Massenberg, Breakforce Solutions. Ms. Henry, just briefly, really looking for the opportunity to kind of put together a demo and actually go through the process, but in that description of the criteria that you're looking for, is it possible to publish something like a section M of what would be the ideal format and messages so that we don't kind of are all over the map with capabilities and solution ideas?
You mean insofar as the guidelines for what we want to see as far as content in the video?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we would go back and find out. We shared some guidelines. I mean, basically it would be the use cases, right?
But wouldn't some of that, I think, your first step is to submit sort of an outline, right? So we're going to have some interaction, I think, with the vendors about, you know, this is how I intend to sort of structure my demo, and then we'll be able to give you some feedback at that point, right? That's the plan.
How are we looking online?
I have one more new one that just came in. Troy DeRoca asked, how does e-discovery play within this aspect of records management?
So we, under Schedule 36, there is a litigation support SIN, which would, you know, typically, I guess, be considered e-discovery. But I think e-discovery tools, in that they're related, or they're ERM relevant or related, would certainly be included. I mean, I don't know if, typically they're sort of certainly related, right? I mean,
we see that for e-discovery tools and records management tools, they have different end games in place, but a lot of the technology behind the services and solutions are similar. So for vendors to be able to say, I'm primarily an e-discovery service, but this is how my tool can be adapted to meet records management purposes and vice versa, is certainly something that we're noticing in the industry. And we're noticing this trend. So the way we've arranged it is to say, well, here's what the universal requirements are. If you're an e-discovery tool that thinks your tool can be adapted to meet those, especially for email or especially for text messages, I figured out a way to do capture. I figured out a way to do metadata management. And when the time comes, I've got a way to dispose of that according to a schedule, then we'd really be interested in that demo. What are the approaches? What are the solutions that people can do to leverage our limited resources? That's what this is all about, trying to help show what can be done, help answer that question. Well, who else has done this? What's available? How do I get started? Or how do I solve this particular problem that we're all facing? That's a very good question.
Okay, I see that there are no further questions online, and looks like it's gotten quieter in the room, which is a good thing. I'm glad we've been able to hang around long enough to answer the questions that are on your mind, and I'm sure there will be more questions coming. So I'd like to thank our panelists. If anything comes to you in the next couple of minutes, I'm sure we'll be hanging around for a couple of minutes. Please feel free to come up. For those of you online, please feel free to email us, contact us with your questions, engage with us. I think in terms of closing remarks before we all go away and have lunch, I like the way Jeff put it. We're looking at total solutions. So the question that Amy asked us earlier, the upstream work, the complementary work, there's a lot of pieces to this, and we're looking forward to engaging with you on several fronts and working with our partners at GSA to try and come up with those total solutions that will allow us all to reach that goal of a fully electronic government. So in the meantime, please stay tuned to Records Express, our blog. You can Google it. It should come up. And you'll see additional information there. And of course, we'll make sure that the recording and the slides get out to everybody so that you can review. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. I know it's a hot Monday in August, but really excited to see all of you here today engaging with us with all of your questions, and we look forward to doing this again soon. So thank you, and have a great week.
Sorry, I guess I missed it.